History of the present complex of schools in central Westville began in March of 1935, when Miss Carr opened the doors of her little private school to 6 pupils, 4 boys and 2 girls. It was housed in a hall on the present site of the Westville Fire Station and Clinic. To quote Miss Carr, "It was not the ideal place by any means, as there was no water laid on and there were only pit toilets, but we overcame these and many other difficulties as they cropped up." By 1941, the school had outgrown its accommodation and a move was made to an old house situated at the present Westville Boys High School site. The school was to continue as a high school for both boys and girls until 1964, when our school was built.
But that was all a vegetable market garden, because under the school there's streams. Don't know if you know, they had quite a lot of problems under the tennis courts and the library because of underground water. As I say, I used to go there and buy my vegetables. To me, she was so upset. She said the government wanted to buy the land and they wanted to put up a school.
Because I can remember the foundations being dug. Look, at that time, the Westville Post Office wasn't there. There was nothing there. Not even Blue Heights was built.
I came in 1964, so we only had, in those days, standard 6, 7 and 9. The others were writing JC and they were writing matric, so they stayed at Boys High. So it was tiny. We only used the bottom corridor. 9 classes, there were 3 per grade, 3 per standard, and it was quite nice because there was absolutely nothing, no facilities, no swimming pool. We used to walk, even in grade 7, standard 7, grade 9, I remember we used to walk to the swimming pool right the way through. In matric there wasn't even a pool for us. So our PE lessons were quite fun.
Because when I first started at Westville Girls High, we weren't allowed to do any athletics. It was considered unladylike.
I was a bit of a rebel, so it didn't go down so well with teachers because we were quite bored. We used to play at junior school, hopscotch and stuff. Now we were ladies who weren't allowed to do anything. We were told we just had to sit, So I used to, down the bottom past that hockey field there was the big stormwater drain that goes right down under the road by the post office. And I bent the bars open and took my mates, and we used to go down and then wave at the girls from the other side of the road. So I wasn't very popular. I was quite naughty, but we looked for fun things. We were little grade 7, 6s, just with a few of us here.
When I was on the council, people used to phone me and they say, "Oh, Mrs. Armstrong, you don't know us. We've just moved to Westville and we've been advised to phone you because you're a retired teacher to find out where we should buy in Westville for good schools. Try and buy as near as possible to Westville Girls High."
We didn't even have an electric bell, so I was in 6A, which would be grade 8A now, and we used to take it in turns to be on bell duty. So we had to keep our eyes on our watches all the time, and when it was time to ring the bell, we would go out into the quad and we would just ring the bells. So that's how small the school was, that everyone could actually hear the bell from that quad area. So, we used to take a few liberties. If it was maths, the bell used to go early, and if it was PE, the bell used to go a little bit late.
I think in most cases, the parents are genuinely concerned and want to work with us. The most awkward situation that I experienced was dealing with admissions, and particularly at the very beginning when the schools were opening up. a father had altered his daughter's report. When we put both reports down and said, we need you to explain what this is about. And he looked at them and then he turned to the poor little girl who was sitting there with big doe eyes and started saying, "How dare you change your report?" And she said, "I didn't, Daddy." And he shouted, and we sat in stunned amazement. And then very quickly he snatched up the altered report, put it in his mouth and ate it.
And we had Miss Hudd. She was quite strict, and we used to have our nails checked. If we bit our nails, we stood on that veranda there and were constantly checked for if we bit our nails and that.
I think about the school and what it represents to me. I always think of community, because the school does build a community for itself, and very high academic standards. I think that the community has always valued education, but I see community as being those people who buy into the ethos of the school. Mm. And people who send the girls to the school respect several things. One is learning, and they don't want rote learning, they want independent critical minds. The second is a respect for manners and form, and the third is self-discipline.
In grade 8, we had a very dear lady from Scotland as our English teacher, remembering that was a time when youngsters were far less outspoken. Mrs. Fuller asked her one day if she had Scotch in her blood. Although we could see that she was somewhat amused by this, she felt that Mrs. Fuller needed to spend some time contemplating her inappropriate inquiry and was duly dispatched outside the classroom. Not to be excluded from the goings-on in the classroom, Mrs. Fuller took it upon herself to write notes to her classmates on a roll of toilet paper that she unravelled from an upstairs empty classroom.
I did get into trouble once again as a teacher with Sue Bolstridge because I was doing homework and my room was opposite the music, because by then they'd built Miss Sethrin's music studio, and we were told at break no parties, absolutely no parties with the matrics, so we knew that. And then I looked out the window and there was a party going on in one of the prefabs, no names mentioned, but a teacher said no, she's having a party with that. And I had my matric class, and then some boys had come to see the music teacher because they'd worked in the musical together. So my kitchen windows were open and I had a pantry was in there. So my matrics weren't interested, so I said, well, there's the worksheet, carry on, I just want to go and see if my printing's ready. So I nipped down to check. I know you're not supposed to leave your class, but I left him to go and fetch my printing, and came back, and there was Mrs. Bolstrid saying, "Have you got boys in your..." "No, I haven't." No, but she'd been told, someone had told on them, they'd seen boys climbing through the window, and of course the girls had put them in my pantry and shut the doors, because they had Yales. So I said, "No, I haven't got boys in here." So she said, "Well, I heard there were boys through the windows." Then, of course, the boys couldn't keep quiet, and she made me unlock the pantry, and then the boys were all hiding.
Secretaries had to type all the papers from the teachers. The teachers wrote them out in longhand, and then they had to correct them, and then they come back and you had to retype them. Luckily they went on to computers, and that made it much simpler. Only one secretary was doing the exam papers when it came to computer, because a lot of the teachers were doing their own. The maths teachers were about the first ones to do their own.
Manual typewriters, and probably those typewriters you had to rub out, and you had to use Tipp-Ex if you made a mistake, and carbon paper. That was another thing. That's how we worked, with carbon paper. So if you made a mistake, you were rubbing out all these copies using carbon paper.
We also were approached to provide sandwiches for the child-headed households in Chesterville. Interact provided the ingredients and the packers and makers of sandwiches. But it cottoned on so well in the school that we had volunteer classes who wanted to be involved. And that's when I found out that there were some girls who had never made a sandwich in their lives.
One thing that really was fascinating over the years were the school plays. They had Mr. Russell Untide there, and I think he was in charge of drama, and he used to put on the most fantastic productions every year. The girls were tremendous, the singing, it was wonderful.
I must say I inherited the singing competition from Mrs. Mack because there hadn't been a full-time teacher beforehand. And the first year, the girls stood very solitary and in their school uniforms on the stage, and they sang one religious song and another of their choice. And a panel of the music teachers, or those teachers who enjoyed music, they were the judges. But it's not like that anymore, because it grew, and despite the infighting in the classrooms during the rehearsals, it produced music of a calibre I'm unbelievably proud of.
Each time the school ran it, one of the schools, we always had something to take home to remind you of the dinner. But as I was saying, the very first one, when these increases came out, we had this first party. There was only about 90 secretaries, and we were at the Caister. As I say, it only cost 11 rand, and the others wouldn't come because it was too pricey. Now I don't know what they pay, but the schools help with the pay. While I was still at the school, Miss Johnson decided that we shouldn't be paying for our own dinner, and so the school paid it.
And I used to have that magazine, 17. I remember it was quite pricey. It was American. I don't know if it's still published these days. And that dealt with teenagers and their problems and things, which was, American, but there wasn't anything else here. And some of the teachers raised their eyebrows a little bit at being so expensive. And I said, no, it's 17, it's for 17-years-old. And I had them all on the shelf, and they loved them. And I, of course, I was a little bit liberal, and I had a history book there, and of course it had the picture of Peterson being carried, And of course the inspector pulled this book off the shelf and said to me, that book's banned. And I said, oh, I didn't know. He said, absolutely, we can't possibly have that on the shelf. That has to be burnt. So he put it away in a cupboard and locked it and issued instructions for it to be burnt. Well, I never burnt it, and it was always in the cupboard.
My time at Westville Girls High was probably one of the best times of my life. I really enjoyed myself. I found what I was passionate about, and the school really helped me to develop what I was good at and helped me to become a really all-rounded person.
And again, I'm very, very proud to have had that experience in my life. Pay tribute to Westville. I wish them well for the next 50 years. I hope that they keep the balance of academics, sport and the arts. And I'm sure that with the new headship, Catherine will keep the same ethos going at that school that I enjoyed being a part of.
Westville Girls High is the best school in the country. Period. Their results are fantastic, and they turn out highly successful people in the community. And I think anybody who's gone to Westville Girls High, it's an extremely fantastic privilege to have been able to share your learning years with your colleagues at that school, at Westville Girls High School. It is the best.